how I'm trading these reversals. So there's a few things that I want to talk about. I'm going to make this section and this part, this discussion here, as simple as possible. And we're going to dive deeper into more about reversals using volume. Right now, we're not going to talk about that. What we're going to talk about right now, again, I'm going to try to make this as simple as possible. We're going to talk about how I use some of these indicators on the MetaTrader platform. What I'm going to share with you right now, as far as the reversals and the templates, let me go to that page right now. We might as well move there. I think we're done, right? Nobody has any other questions about the HL30 here. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the reversals. So there's a few indicators that I use to help me identify reversals. Now, I said in the beginning here that I'm going to try to make this as simple and straightforward, right to the core of the overall, like the structure of what I'm looking for. I'm going to go deeper into other trainings, in other future trainings here shortly. I'm going to go deeper into, for example, again, like I mentioned, volume. We're going to be talking about certain patterns, price patterns. But what I'm going to start off here with is the indicators that I use to help me identify tops and bottoms. That's another thing we're going to go deeper into. Is we'll spend time just training and going over the process, my process for identifying tops, and then we're going to go over my process for how I identify bottom patterns. Again, 3 pushes to a high. You've probably seen the video in the Facebook group, and then also inside of the membership area. So those are at its most simplest form, 3 pushes to a high, and then I go deeper in the membership area. You can see in those modules, I'm really talking about how I use the 3 pushes to a high method on the larger time frames, and it helps me identify key support and resistance levels on an intraday basis, right, when I'm trading off of the 30-minute or the 1 hour. So again, we're not going to go into too much detail with the candle patterns. I'm just going to explain what I'm using here as far as the indicators and why. And then in the membership area, you are a beta program member, so you're a member of the Forex Mastery and Monetization Blueprint beta program. In that membership area that you have access to, in the modules at the section 13, I'm going to have this video that we're talking about. So I'm going to edit this so that we talk about the reversal and the time frames and the indicators. And then I'm going to give you links so that you can download these indicators, because these indicators right here, these are not standard with MT4. You have to download these indicators onto your computer and then import them into your MT4 account. So when you download an indicator, I'll just briefly go over it. You go right over here to open data folder. That's how I do it. I open up the data folder. So it's going to open up a folder, and I'm going to have the indicators on my desktop, and then I drag it right in here, the MQL4, and then indicators. I'll double click on the indicators. So I will split the screen, and I'll minimize this one, and then grab the indicator on my desktop and drag it right into this window, right in here. So you can see I have bandwidth, I have Bollinger Bands, the bandwidth, I'm sorry, percent B, and then I have, I think I have that indicator too, that Woody's indicator down here at the bottom, right here, Woody's indicator. You need to install, obviously, both of them. I forget what they call it. Like, this is the EX4 file, and then the MQL source file. Both of them need to be in there at the same time. And then here you can see the pivot points that I use as well. So let's go back to the charts. So for reversals, the indicators that I'm primarily relying on, first of all, the Bollinger Bands. Bollinger Bands obviously are stock with your MT4, percent B, and bandwidth. Now, these two indicators are they're 2 of the primary indicators that John Bollinger recommends you use when you're attempting to do something like this, like, identifying tops and bottoms and things like that. There's another indicator called intraday intensity. You don't find that with too many other indicators, and I have tried to. I think I found one years ago for MT4. It wasn't doing the same thing that it does on the other platforms. So you could probably leave out that intraday intensity. If you find one, work with it. But again, we do really well with and I'm going to strip it down to its most simplest form here, but just these indicators here. Now, the Woody CCI, I'm doing something at the same time, not just so for example, when I trade the continuation breakout trade, you know that when we get a signal, I look at all three or all of the indicators that I'm using, the Bollinger Bands, the CCI, the MACD histogram, and there can't be any divergence. When I look for let's say a bottom pattern here, I'm looking at the Bollinger Bands, but I don't necessarily need to see, I mean, I'll look for the CCI divergence or MACD divergence, but I can see that on another chart. Normally, I wouldn't have on this template for the reversals, and I'm going to give you the template as well. It's going to be in the membership area in section 13. So again, in section 13, you're going to see a replay of this video. You're going to get links to download these indicators, including the Woody's CCI indicator, and again, the templates. So the template does not have the Woody's CCI. I just throw this on here because I'm doing some other things at the same time, very often that ghost pattern. So I'll look for the ghost pattern every once in a while, especially when it comes down to a key support or resistance level. That would help me identify a low or confirm with an entry. So I'm not going to go too deep into the patterns and the entries, but the ghost pattern, trading that Woody's CCI ghost pattern, that video is also inside of the membership area. So you have access to that too. You'll be able to find that in the membership area, the ghost, how to trade the ghost Woody's CCI ghost pattern. Again, the template itself, though, to identify tops and bottoms, I'm primarily going to rely on the Bollinger Bands and %B and bandwidth. Now, it is possible that you could get away with just the bandwidth, and I would be very careful because I get that question quite a bit from members that start using this method. So let's say, for example, a bottom. A bottom is going to develop maybe at a key support or resistance level, sometimes a double zero number. Sometimes those can provide some temporary technical support or resistance. One of the first things, and again, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but one of the first things I'm going to be paying attention to with the indicator that's here in the price pane, the price window, is the way the candles are moving outside of the lower band. So in this case, it was in a downtrend, and I'm trying to figure out, right? I want to know, is this going to be a temporary bottom? Now, obviously, this is relative to just this time frame. We're looking at a 30-minute chart, euro dollar. So at this point, you see that the candles are closing outside of the band. That's usually what happens on a W bottom pattern. The left side of that W bottom, the candles do close outside of the band, and then it'll pull back up, and then it'll make another move lower. Now, obviously, this is going to be a much more clear, let's say on a 1 hour or 4 hour, and then it'll make a new low. And the W bottom patterns, the left side of the W and the right side of the W, they're not always symmetrical. There's going to be a high, left side of the W and sometimes a lower right side of the W, and other times it's going to be the exact opposite. Nevertheless, we're still looking at and watching how the candles also behave inside and around the Bollinger Bands. On the right side of that, or the last move, we would prefer to see a picture-perfect move like that, a W bottom pattern, if it's a bottom pattern that we're actually trying to trade, and the candles will remain inside of the band. So the first left side of that move to the downside, the candles are closing outside of the band, and then it'll pull back up, and then on the last move to the downside here, confirming and forming and completing that W pattern, the candles are generally and usually in a picture-perfect opportunity. They're going to remain, the candle bodies themselves, closed inside of the bands. Now, it's possible that there could be some spikes and some wicks through the lower band, but we want to be paying attention to the candles themselves. Now, that's not a key primary factor or component to solidifying our decision to execute and confirming a W bottom, is that the candles on the right side of the W bottom remain inside. It is just a picture-perfect opportunity. That's what I'm looking for. If they don't, maybe they're taking out key support lows, and maybe it would indicate or signal the possibility of another stronger move to the downside. Nevertheless, I've always said that the picture-perfect opportunities, you don't always get them, but when you see them, they're the trades that work out always the best. In other words, when you get into the trade, you're not really worried about them. You know 100% that everything looks just right. It is the most picture-perfect opportunity, and those are the ones that work all of the time. Again, confirming and making sure that you know the strategy anyway, right? You could make some mistakes. Don't make mistakes. If you're not making any mistakes, you know the strategy. Picture-perfect opportunities are going to be your best bet. Now, I mentioned moments ago that sometimes students and subscribers and members will say, well, I tried, I'm using your W bottom and 3 pushes to a high. I'm using the indicators, and to save some space, I got rid of %B. And some people just don't like the way it looks. They don't want to spend the time trying to understand how it works. And this bandwidth indicator is much more obvious. So very often I talk about how it's a matter of developing that pattern recognition, right? We all know that humans have this great ability to identify and recognize patterns and movement. And the more you expose yourself to this, the easier and faster it becomes to spot some of these good opportunities, especially as they're developing. So I'm going to compress this indicator, get it out of the way so we're really not focusing in on it. And we're going to look at and this is what we're talking about. So again, some of my subscribers and members and students tell me that this is an indicator that they're very comfortable using because it's a lot easier to spot these turning points. So I'm going to detach the charts here. We're going to go back. So we had a move that dropped lower and then stalled. Notice the bandwidth. So it's not doing anything. It's not curving down. It's not doing anything. It's still pointing up. We wouldn't be tempted to try to buy right away. And what we're primarily looking for, and again, this is the most simplistic way to look at and use bandwidth. And the reason why I'm sharing this with you in this manner, in this way, without going too deep into the structure of confirmation with the bandwidth, is that visually, when you're looking at your charts, I want you to be able to scan through your charts and identify these setups as they're developing, so you can prepare yourself for these trades. So when we see a move like this, right, we know that eventually this move is going to slow down. It's going to find a temporary support, and it might provide an opportunity to buy. We don't buy just because it's turning down, but that's what this indicator would indicate. So I'm going to continue to move it out a little bit further, and then you'll notice how the bandwidth is starting to curve. It's not pointing down yet, but it's starting to slow down. And then at this point, it flattens out. You see a bullish candle. That could be a Tech 1 trade. I wouldn't necessarily trade it just yet. It hasn't really completed that W bottom pattern. If we went to a smaller time frame, like let's say at the 5-minute, which I don't primarily trade off of, but you could probably find the W bottom pattern in here with the 5-minute chart. So at this point, we wait. Now we get the first candle, or the first point where it's actually turning down. Bandwidth at this point is turning down. At this point, then I would start looking for the actual W bottom patterns, identifying how the candles are closing within and around the Bollinger Bands, and then looking for a trading opportunity. Now, at this point, this really isn't a trading opportunity, but it might give me the opportunity to find a high and a low, and then box in that range of consolidation and maybe look for a breakout. And let's say that this is a temporary low that holds, let's say for a day or two or three, and that there's a temporary move to the upside, and it might give me an opportunity to trade a continuation breakout trade back up. But at this point, I have some confirmation with the bandwidth indicator that this thing, what it's in its most simplistic understanding of what it's showing me, and the way I interpret this when I'm visually looking through my charts and scanning, is that this move here, this downtrend, this short move here, it's not necessarily a strong downtrend. It's all part of an overall trend. But this move here from that high to that low, it's done, and it's likely to go sideways. It does not mean that it's going to be a full reversal. To get into and confirm a full reversal, we need to start looking at it from the reversal setup point of view, which is an entirely different video and lesson altogether. Right now, what I want to show you is how to use these indicators, and then the simplest indicator to use when you're scanning through your charts to find a possible setup that might give you an opportunity in the next few hours, or maybe the next trading session. Well, right now we're going through and starting with the Asian session, so it might be a little bit slower, but this is indicating something, right? It's telling us that this move here is done. So another way to use this is that if you are in a trade as it starts to move lower, well, then you're going to be watching this bandwidth indicator, and when it turns down, that could be an indication that maybe it's time to close your position. You don't know how much further it's going to go, and you want to lock in some profits there at this point, depending on where you get in. That's another way to use it. So that's the simplest way to use these indicators, and this is probably the easiest one that everybody agrees is the one that they look at and makes the most sense when they're quickly scanning through the charts, looking for reversal opportunities, or at least to identify when a short-term trending move like this is done. Like that's all there is on this one. And there's no mistaking it when we start using this indicator. It's not 100% confirmed. It does not mean that that's always the best way to use it, but you can clearly see what's going on. You know, you're reaching the end of the day. There's a lot of things to take into consideration. The time that this is actually all happening as well, and it's a great opportunity. So that's the easiest way, and I'm going to stop here talking about it because we're going to go deeper into, again, using these indicators to identify and confirm the 3 pushes to a high, W bottom patterns. We'll find real W bottom patterns and it'll be really obvious, and then we'll review how these indicators play out as that W bottom pattern unfolds and develops and the structure completes and then gives us the actual entry to trade it. So again, in the membership area that you have access to, beta program members, section 13, you're going to watch a replay of everything I just talked about right now, and then you're going to have access and links to download these indicators, and then download these indicators and install them into your MT4 platform. And then once you have the indicators, install the indicators first in your MT4 account. Remember how I went over here to Open Data folder. You want to install the indicators first, and then download and install the templates, because once you install the templates and you use the templates for each one of these currency pairs, you'll be able to, it'll automatically pull the bandwidth, the Bollinger Bands, and percent %B, these indicators in here. Now the Woody's CCI indicator, again, we're using that to do different things. Watch the membership in that section, that module about the ghost pattern, a few other things. There's a few other ways to use Woody's, and I give a description of my experience using the Woody's CCI indicator, and also trading with those Woody's CCI traders. I did that for a while, years and years and years ago. It was a pretty interesting experience. I don't necessarily believe in and trade exactly the way they do, of course. I've got my own method, but it was a pretty interesting experience, and I talk about that in the membership area in that module on the Woody's CCI.